Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the final episode of the music theory crash course portion of this video series. We talked about chords and scales last time, and I'd like to continue talking about them in this episode. So let's get started. The first thing I'd like to talk about today is something called an inversion. We talked last time about a chord having its root as its lowest note, but once we've established that formation, we could rearrange the notes, move some notes an octave up or something like that, and it would rearrange what notes are lowest or highest. When we do this, we get something called an inversion. So here's our root position C major chord. As you can see, C is in the bottom, and the 1-3-5 is in reference to the scale degrees of a C major scale. So to make the major chord, we use the corresponding keys 1, 3, and 5 scale degrees. We can now take this C and bring an octave up, and we would get a first inversion. Now our root is in the top, and our third is in the bottom. We could do this one more time where we take this E and bring that an octave up, bringing us to a second inversion with the 3 in the top and the 5 in the bottom. I want you to pay attention to how much smoother chord transitions can be with inversions, both in terms of the way they sound and the way that they would be played. On the left-hand side, we have root position C to F. On the right-hand side, we have root position C to second inversion F. If you were playing these chords on a piano, here are some arrows indicating which way the fingers would move. Not only do they not move as far on the right-hand side, but one of the fingers doesn't even have to move at all. So now we can talk about forming different kinds of chords. Let's think now back to our root position triad. What if we added another note a third above the triad? Now we have a 4-part chord. So let's first talk about the C major 7. As you can see, we're using scale degrees 1, 3, 5, and 7 to construct this chord. Or in other words, we have a major third, then we put a minor third on top of it, and then we put a major third on top of that. Green flags are major thirds, and blue flags are minor thirds in the rest of this presentation. Hopefully you can see why it's called a C major 7. Now a C dominant 7 is a little bit funny because we're not really using the 7 of the major scale. We're using a flat 7. So, of course, that means that our top interval will now be a minor third instead of a major third. If there's a C major 7, then of course there has to be a C minor 7. You recognize our C minor triad, our C, E flat, G. We've now added a note a minor third above that. And it makes sense that this would be B flat because it is indeed a note in the C minor scale. B, though, is not. Now we can start saying, okay, what if we don't want to have a perfect fifth between the 1 and the 5? Then you'd end up with a half diminished if you just brought the G down to a G flat. You can see our C diminished triad is hidden in here. On the top, though, we have a note a major third above that. Therefore, it's only half diminished. How do we make it fully diminished, you might ask? What if we made all of these intervals minor thirds? So we'll bring down our top note by another half step. We're still going to write it as some sort of B because we still want to have that third from G to B. We can go even further. Imagine those chords, and now we're going to put another note a third above those. Now we've created a 5-part chord. C major 9 seems pretty self-explanatory. We've added another note a third above, which is in the C major scale, which is a D. So it's going to be a minor third on top of our existing major 7 chord. A C9 is much like a C dominant 7, where the 7 is flat. A C minor 9 is exactly what you would expect. We have a C minor triad with a flat 7 and a 9. Once again, notice how all of these notes are contained within the C minor scale. You might be thinking to yourself, don't we want to know what 4 and 5-part chords are diatonic? For major keys, the 1 and the 4 are major 7s, and the 5 is the dominant 7. The 2, 3, and 6 are minor 7s, and the 7 is a half diminished. For minor keys, you can look for yourself to see what these are. Once again, I'd like to point out that preference in classical music for a major 5 chord. In this case, if the 5 chord were major, it would be a dominant 7, not a major 7. So with that, I would actually like to talk more about the dominant seven. The dominant seven is kind of a special chord. You might be wondering why exactly it's called a dominant seven. To do that, we need to understand the anatomy of a scale. The first degree is called the tonic, the fifth degree is called the dominant, and the seventh degree is called the leading tone, because the leading tone leads you back to the tonic. You can now understand that we just said in a previous slide, the diatonic chord built off of scale degree 5 is a dominant 7, and that's why it's called a dominant 7. So in the key of F major, which we have here, a dominant 7 is going to be diatonic when it's starting on C, and it's going to resolve to the home chord of F major. This dominant 7 chord is riddled with tension because from E to B flat, we have a diminished 5. So this diminished 5 or tritone interval is always contained within dominant 7, and it's a very dissonant sounding chord. This tritone interval particularly wants to be resolved. Furthermore, it contains the leading tone, which means that it has a feeling that it wants to go back to F. So I've diagrammed it out here, and you can see how the tritone becomes resolved into a major third. In this case, E going up to F, B flat going down to A. This is what it sounds like. I would like to also point out that this also works for minor keys. So if we were in F minor, we would still have this C dominant 7 being the same as it would. But instead of having E and B flat resolving to F and A, we have E and B flat resolving to F and A flat. So we're going to switch gears a little bit now, and I'd like you to recall how the minor scale is just a major scale started on a different scale degree. But what if we tried starting this major scale on other degrees? What would we get? Well, we would get a mode. And a mode is a scale when you start it on a note that it normally doesn't start on. There's 7 modes of a major scale if you include the Ionian, which is simply just starting on scale degree 1, so it's just a C major scale. On the right-hand side is the formula in relation to the major scale of the note that we started on. So for a Dorian mode, we're starting on the second scale degree of a major scale, and it's going to be a D Dorian because it starts and ends on D. It orients our ears towards D being the most important note. This looks kind of like a D major scale, but the F and the C are different. So a Dorian is a mode, and you can get a Dorian by taking a major scale, taking the 3 and flatting it, taking the 7 and flatting it. How about Phrygian? Well, Phrygian, E Phrygian in this case, uses all the notes from the C major scale. Normally an E major scale is going to have F sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and D sharp. But instead, these are just natural. So that means that in order to make a Phrygian, you need to take the major scale in E, flat the 2, 3, 6, and 7, and you can do this with any major scale, actually. You would get a Phrygian. You can see the rest for yourself, but we've got Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian as well. Hold on, let's look at the Aeolian one more time. Normally it's an A major scale, but instead we have the 3, 6, and 7 flatted. This is our natural minor scale that we talked about last time. Let's just present one more example to make this extra clear. Here's a B Phrygian, and we spelled it with a B key signature. Normally C, D, F, G, and A are all sharp, but since we're going to flat 2, 3, 6, and 7, we have that C sharp is C natural, D sharp is now D natural. Same thing with G and A. So let's go to the whiteboard to do that just one more time. For our whiteboard activity today, we are going to be constructing a B-flat Dorian. Since the Dorian starts on the second degree of a major scale, we want to find out what major scale is B-flat the second degree of. If you answered the A-flat major scale, then you would be correct. So this means that we can essentially just write an A-flat major scale and then make a few modifications. So as we know, we're going to construct our scale with a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And we want to start on B flat, and we also want to end on B flat. So we've used all the notes in a major scale. except now we're going to be starting on a different note. So this is our B flat Dorian. All right, so we just constructed the B flat Dorian mode by writing the A flat major scale and writing it as if we were starting on B flat. But I want you to also recall the formulas that we talked about. The formula for a Dorian mode is to take the major scale and flat the 3 and also flat the 7. So given that in mind, we have a B flat scale written here. If we want to make it Dorian, we simply take our 3 and we flat it. And then we take our 7 and we also flat it. So now we have a B flat Dorian mode. So believe it or not, we have reached the end of our music theory crash course. I know that it was a lot of information, so I appreciate you all for sticking through this with me. And I can't wait to start things off next episode with our first analysis of a song. So until then.